Construction champions, it's your host, Ron Newsbaum, and we're here for another. I'm going to stop saying amazing because I think they're better than amazing episodes of Construction Champions podcast, where, as always, we're burning the damn house down. And that house is your business, it's your relationships, it's your thought process around how we're doing life in the construction industry these days. My goal from day one has been to change that and to create the champion mindset around the construction industry that I know and I love, and I think it's how it should be. And how do we do that here? We bring on amazing guests. And today is no different. Mike, it is fantastic to have you here with us today.
Ron, I'm glad to be here and glad you're bringing it. I'm excited about this. I got to give that same level of energy right back to you here. So
There
I'm
we
I'm excited
go.
about this.
I think it's all
We're gonna do
about that.
this.
Like, if you're
Here we go.
committed to doing something, you should have some energy around it. This is such.
Absolutely. No, no, no. I mean, it needs to be contagious. I mean, you got to put that forth. And frankly, when you're doing Zoom calls and stuff like that, you got to do it 10x if you're watching it on YouTube or whatever, if you were doing this in a room with somebody. So hope folks
I
out
might
there
take that.
watching and listening get that.
Maybe that's how I should start every Zoom call I ever do from that. Could you imagine you come on a Zoom call and I immediately come on video and off mute, and it just brings some energy like, hey, I'm Ron Deuce, and I'm excited to do this call with you today.
I would love that. I would pay. I mean, you'd be making money on Cameo in no time, Ron, doing that.
Oh
People would
my
be paying for
God.
that.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
So why don't you introduce yourself to all the
Yes.
construction champions out there so they get to know you?
Awesome. No, thanks, Ron. Hi, everyone. Mike Tedasco here. I have a background in the world of business for many years. I started off as like a finance and accounting person. That evolved into starting my own business, which was like an e-commerce website 15 or so years ago, doing that. Then I got a job at PayPal, which I'm sure folks have heard of. So my passion that brought me there was like serving small businesses. Like, how do we make, and because when I had my own business, like I used PayPal to take payments and all that. And that's a lot of what I did there. Worked there for years, ran the innovation group for the last half that I was at PayPal. And for the last couple of years, I actually moved from the corporate world into the world of academia, where I'm at an AI center focusing on AI research and projects and mentoring and working with companies and people in that space.
Awesome, man. Well, I am excited to have this conversation and ask you the $1 million question.
Yes.
And that is, what makes a construction champion?
Yeah.
Ever found yourself revisiting a project because of a small miscommunication? It's frustrating and costly. That's why I switched to BuilderComms. Their construction communication management solution cuts through the noise, ensuring my team is always on the same page. Now, missteps are rare and rework is a thing of the past. Ready to streamline your projects? Check out BuilderComms today.
Look, what makes a construction champion? I'm going to talk from a small business owner perspective because that is where my passion is. That's where my passion has always been. I remember I used to live in Ohio, and at some point we had like it was in Cincinnati, Ohio. There was like a Vietnamese restaurant that opened up, and like no one was going there, and I'm like, why is nobody going to this place? I need to tell people. Like my heart always goes out for people who put it on the line, whether it's like, whether they're a plumber, whether they're doing construction, whether they're starting a restaurant, whatever it is, like you making that leap and being courageous to do that is something that matters because you're building this business in service of others. You are building this because you want to you want to build a better deck, a better porch, a better whatever it is for your customer. And like, that's pretty amazing to do something like that. So what makes a construction champion? It's somebody who is always in service of their customer because like we are there as business owners, as employees, to do good, to add value and all that. And like when you are doing that, you're a construction champion.
That is what matters. Is at the end of the day, it's about the customers. the more we focus on that, the more we do change the reputation of the construction industry.
Yeah.
And I love that. That to me is one of the greatest things we can do because let's just face it, customer reputation in the construction industry is a little shaky at
Yeah.
best sometimes, like what people think about the construction industry. And I'm all about changing that. And that
Yeah.
starts with better customer service.
And look, I think that's important in every business. And look, while you say it might be shaky, look, there's a whole bunch of businesses that are like that have a lot further to go. Um, I think the great thing is if you're listening to this and you do retail, you do commercial, you're doing whatever, you know, or it doesn't matter like what part of the trade that you are involved in. Like, take this as an opportunity to further differentiate yourself,
Hmm.
to really make yourself stand out. Because, like, if that is the reputation that's out there, and I'm not saying it isn't as a whole, but like for you individually listening to this, that means it's even more of an opportunity for you to wow your customer, to surprise them. To do way more than like they ever thought, like, oh my gosh, like I've heard all these like I remember the first time I went to France. This is an example. Like what is the one thing Americans hear all the time about going to France and interacting with people who are French? Ron, what would you say is the
I
stereotype
would
we
say
hear about how they
they
yeah.
don't like Americans.
Yeah, they don't like Americans and they're rude and all of this other kind of stuff. And so I had all of these files in my head for years. And then like I went to France for the first time as an adult and I'm there, I'm like, they're actually they're nice. They're people. They're talking. They're doing their best. Like I put out a little bit of French there. It's not like this like Parisian snobbery. And like I heard that again and again. And like they were probably just normal, but because I had like this like file in my head of like, oh, this is they're going to be the most rude people in the world. No, they're just people with all that. And so yeah, for all of you out there, like that's a huge opportunity to really, really, really stand out, and make for a better experience for everyone. Because look, happy customers should make your life easier too.
Well, amen to that.
Hopefully, yes,
That's what that's the mountaintop I'm out here screaming from
yeah,
is just because of how it's always been, just because it is the reputation, like you fell for the same thing that happens in the construction industry where we let 2 or 3% dictate the entire reputation for the
yeah,
industry. And that's what probably is happening over in France. There's 2 or 3% of people that are rude and hate
exactly,
Americans, but for some reason they dictate the entire reputation of a population. And like that's how it is in
exactly,
construction. Like we all have every industry has people that are not doing the right things by the customer.
yeah.
I think it's time that in the construction industry, we stop letting that be the narrative as the masses when I don't believe that to be true, but we just let it go because we're like, it's the construction industry. It's just what it is.
Yeah. Well, and I think in many ways it just comes down to stories. It comes down to stories and podcasts and places like this. It comes down to experiences. It comes down to all this stuff because like I mean, I'm sure for all the people who said that the French are so rude, blah blah blah, they had some experience that they then magnify and they say, well, all the French are rude, whatever it might be. And I'm sure it's similar there. Like it's platforms like this, Ron, that are about getting that story out to say, hey, there's a new wave, there's a new um, narrative that we need to tell out there in the world about what that is, and frankly, for all the people again in the trade watching this right now to really embrace that and say, like, okay, maybe there is some reason. How do we do just, 10% better going forward? How do I be more responsive to customers? How do I, look them in the eye more or whatever it might be? Just some of the simple stuff of like really treating people, in a way like it's not even hard to do that sometimes. Like this happens with doctors a lot. So Ron, they've done studies on this, but like doctors and like think about the experience when a doctor is just kind of typing away, looking at the screen while you're talking to them in the office versus the doctor who sits down, looks you straight in the eye, and is just having a conversation and listening attentively and so forth. There's a huge difference. And patient outcomes for that. That's your health. That's your life. Like to then apply those same principles to the business world, so much value in that.
I love it. I love this conversation. It fascinates me because I get so many people on here from just different walks of life. Been in the construction industry their entire life, just started a construction business. Somebody like yourself who hasn't necessarily worked in the
Yeah.
construction industry at all. But these are all the perspectives. This is why having these conversations is so important because you can't just have one perspective on everything. You have to be willing to look at the global thing of what is construction and what is that customer experience in this. And if you just got a bunch of construction guys here that have the conversation, you would get the outcome that they would want instead of actually working on a strategy and creating an outcome that is best for the industry, it's best for the customer, it's best for everybody involved, and that starts with give and take by both parties.
And what you're basically that's exactly right. And I think, some of it just comes down to diversity of thoughts. And so back when I was at PayPal, I was running the innovation group, and one of the things we would do is we would host these brainstorm sessions, trying to work through really hard problems, trying to really think about the future, and sometimes it was like a big technical solution. And what made for those best sessions, to kind of carry this construction analogy down back to things that I've done in the past, so if we had a big technical problem, yeah, we'd have a few engineers in that room, who really knew computer science, who knew how to build experience, who knew how to do AI or whatever it might be. Um, but then you bring in some other folks. You bring in somebody from marketing. You bring in somebody who doesn't even know what the problem is, but they're just smart in their own ways and just have some street smarts or whatever. And like that dynamic would again and again, Ron, make for the best outcomes from those sessions. If you just had a whole group of engineers who all like relatively thought the same way, like, yeah, they knew that problem, but they also kind of had blinders on for, well, we know that didn't work in the past, or that's really difficult or whatever. You bring in some level of naive. This is why Elon Musk has been so successful in many ways in his career. I mean, if you look at a company like SpaceX, which he created, he was not hiring a lot of people from NASA to build that. Intentionally, he was bringing people from outside the industry because, the Ashley Vance book about Elon Musk very famously talks about how I think Lockheed Martin, I believe, the cost of a radio to transmit information back from orbit back to Earth was something like $100,000 is what Lockheed would charge. And he basically told his engineers, do it for $1,000. A 1/100th of the cost of that. And what that actually led to was they had to build it from the ground up. And they figured, oh, if we look at this from a completely different perspective, there's a lot of value in doing something like that. So I think, with all of these things, like bringing in that outside perspective, hopefully adds tons of value to any problem that you're trying to solve and getting to a better answer.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's because you hire people from NASA, they come with NASA thoughts. They have
Yeah.
preconceived notions on what is possible. And for somebody like Elon Musk, you're constantly trying to do the opposite of
Yeah.
what people think is impossible. Like you
Yeah.
said, let's do this for
Southwest Airlines is another example. For years, Southwest would not hire people who had worked for other airlines because their brand was like, hey, if you've been working at Delta for all these years, we actually don't want you because you've kind of learned the opposite of what we're trying to do here. And, I mean, so like it all depends on like, well, what is it that you're trying to build for your culture and all that?
awesome. I love it. So with that being said, from an outsider's perspective, having the understanding of the technology, everything that you've done, what you currently do, is how can we take some of this stuff from outside of the construction world with customer experience and where technology is going and weave that into everyday life in construction?
Yeah. We technologically are probably living at by far the most exciting time of our lives. I'm 47 years old. So I had never seen the internet before I went to college. I went to college in 1995, University of Illinois, and it happened to be like when I got there, like just Illinois, our state school just happened to be building like Netscape, which was the original browser and all that. So I get to school and like the internet's in front of me. I'm like, what the hell is this? Come back. I'm like, this is like another world. This is like completely different experience that we just like that just vastly changed and enabled you and me to talk right now, to meet each other, to communicate, and it enables the people who are watching this to see us, and enables them to talk to their customers out there. Like all this stuff was enabled by that. That was the biggest shift I've seen in my lifetime until really 2001, 2000, or 2021, 2022, and what we're seeing with artificial intelligence. Where we're going with this is going to be an even bigger boom than anything we saw with the internet and how it's going to change our world. Now, if you go back about 10 years in the world of AI, and I've been in the world of AI innovation for quite some time, I think the consensus was that AI was going to take it was going to take jobs related to labor for just a broad term. That if you're flipping burgers at McDonald's, if you're doing whatever it might be, not to disparage any of that, but like all of those jobs were the ones that the Silicon Valley folks around here, myself and others, were like, oh God, those jobs are going to be gone. They're not going to exist anymore. And what we saw was, no, those jobs are there. Those jobs are healthy because what we found out with AI is, oh, this can actually talk like a lawyer now. Oh, it can actually behave like an accountant. It could write creatively. It could help you do an email. It can act as an administrative assistant for you. It could do all of these things. And that was something that was completely unexpected until about 2021, 2022 timeframe. With where we're at today, if I have a construction business, I would really take a serious look at like, okay, how do I now use these tools to take all of the, dare I say, non-value add stuff that I'm doing? I mean, anything, by definition, I would think, again, if I'm, this beautiful shelf behind me here that I have, somebody built this thing into the wall and like they did an amazing job. And like, this is where the value add was. It wasn't in invoicing me. It wasn't in chasing me down for money. It wasn't in writing a contract. It wasn't in doing all of that stuff. The actual building is what really mattered with something like this. And I am sure there's so many people out there right now who have these businesses who are at the top and they're like, oh my God, it's managing schedules. It's calling up people. It's trying to find customers. It's making sure things are good on Yelp and all of this other kind of stuff that I have to deal with. These are things that either can be automated today or will be able to be automated in the very, very near future. And, we could start to get into this, like, well, what are the baby steps that you could take to start to go in that direction to be able to do that so that, again, so you can have more time on the value add, on the actual building, just talking with customers and not have to worry about like, oh God, I got to do all these things when I get back to home or whatever it might be, but like they're all stacking up. Like, no, like doing the more value added stuff is what AI is really going to enable in the short term. Longer term, who knows where that's going to go? But like we got years before any of that for now.
I think what fascinates me the most about it is when we start talking about the automations. And for a long time, I was very anti the automations of stuff because you lost any of the human element. Like everything became very standardized. But
Yeah.
with AI, it's not. Like you can automate tasks, you can automate messaging, and all of this stuff does not lose the personal element. And it's
Yeah.
getting better and better every day. Like
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can even so one of the, and I'm going to throw out a bunch of names of companies. I have no financial stake in any of these. I always try and stay independent just to be clear. But one is called Claude by Anthropic. And one of the things you can do in Claude, it's similar to ChatGPT. It's probably not as popular, but it's really good. And one of the things you can actually put samples of your own writing in there, and then it will sort of learn from your writing just for you. And then it will actually, so if you say, "Hey, can you write an email to this person that kind of says this, and but don't be too stern about it, be, or whatever," it'll do that for you, and it'll do that in your style. And those are the things that really add value. When ChatGPT launched, might even been a little bit before, one of my favorite stories was of somebody who is an engineer here, or an engineer just in the AI space, who had a neighbor who he mentored who had a lawn care business. And I believe he may have been on the spectrum a little bit. Like, the person who did a wonderful job manicuring lawns, trimming hedges, all of the things you want him to do. But like setting up an email and sending an email for him was extremely difficult, extremely difficult. So what he did was he just set up something, and it took him like 5 minutes, connected a couple programs so that if he received an email, he could type something out in his way that would be considered, I'm going to put up quotes here, unprofessional. If just
Mhm.
a customer who didn't know him would have seen that, they're like, "Oh, wait, what is this?" And it would take that and it would put it into a professional format, for lack of a better thing. And so for his business, what would have taken him a long time, just like really not like, there's again, not where you want him focusing his time, dare I say? Like that's like when you're paying somebody to do that, I'm not paying somebody to write an email. I'm paying you because I want my hedges trimmed or a lawn mowed or whatever it might be. And if you do a good job, that should be what matters. And like using AI was just a simple way to remove that barrier. So he could more clearly communicate in a way that his customers expected to be communicated.
I love that because that's one of the things like at Builder Comms is we work on is every time sending your best message, like your best communication with your customer, because we're not known for being able to craft that stuff. And that's
Yes.
one of the things in the background that we're working on with AI is just being able to say, here's what you should, this is like, here's the message that you should be sending in a way that your customer will understand it. Because, like you said, it, it shouldn't be the thing that decides the job. It should be all work. But all too
Yeah.
often, it is the emails, it is how we send unprofessional messages, or we use dialogue that people don't understand that cost us the job.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way. And it shouldn't be that way. It should just come down to how good can you do the job, not because I'm not the best when it comes to sending this message.
Absolutely. And communication is just such an important part of that. Think about, you know, it, I mean, we might get to a point at some point. We're not there now, but it might actually even be able to get to a point if you're sending somebody a note over Gmail. Um, my Gmail might be able to interpret my level of expertise around, around construction terminology. And it might say I'm beginner or advanced. Let's just keep it real simple there. And if you send something with like complex terminology and I'm an advanced person, I might see it as is. If I'm more of a beginner, I might actually see it on the other side and it's going to talk to me in the way I want to be. And it's going to like, "Hey, Mike, this was translated and this is what this means," and so forth. Like that's the kind of direction we're going down here. And that's like really exciting to meet people where they're at, which is going to just improve communications. Like so many of the problems in the world are just people talking to each other and not hearing each other, not talking in the same way, just more broadly. And so like if you could be more clear and concise
Mhm.
using builder comms, using any of the tools that are out there to get your message out, that's hugely
Cool.
beneficial.
I mean, I use the terminology of just meet people where they're at
Yes.
all the
Yes.
time because I believe that is the future. Like, how do we just meet people where they're at, especially in the construction space? Like, not every construction business is different. And it's like, how do we meet them where they're at to be able to help them? And I love, man, that like, yeah, what you just said, that technology isn't there, but like, that's one of the things is that I'm working on, like, how do we build out is when like we build this database of construction terminology and we can interpret it to where 90% of the population can take something that somebody that's very technically sound in construction and they lay this out that makes zero sense to most of us. But the
Yeah,
problem is people won't say they don't understand stuff because it becomes an ego and pride thing. So they're like,
absolutely.
oh, I understand that. And they have no clue. And then the contractors on the job site, and they're like, what the hell are you doing? Well, you said you understood, but
Yeah.
they had no idea. So it's like, how do we take that message, translate it in a way to where everybody can understand it? But what you're talking about is being able to land it where they're at in their understanding. That is to me absolutely unbelievable. So you take something that becomes semi-generic because we have to take a message and broaden it out to where we think 90% of the people can understand it. So you're going to have people that think, man, this is really basic, and you're going to have people that just understand it. But with what you're saying, it's being able to, that message is crafted for them every time it lands in their inbox with what their knowledge base on that subject is, whether it's construction or cars or anything. And I love that.
Yeah, I mean to use another example, and I'm actually I write a blog about AI stuff for normal folk, and I'm probably like next week because I've been thinking about this a lot. Um, I mean, let's just take this example. So I have a fifth grader, and in her math class, she gets work assignments, worksheets all the time, and you know what? All the 30 kids in her class get the exact same worksheets. Um, One thing I've noticed with kids, and this is 100% true with adults as well, if I were teaching that class with the tools that exist today, you could do this in ChatGPT today. I would start the school year and I would just ask every kid, who are your friends? Give me the name of some of your friends. Are there family members? You got any pets? What do you like to do? Blah, blah, blah. Just get some personal information about them that I would just at a high level put into that. Just have a little spreadsheet of anything the kids want to share and parents are okay with or whatever. And then I would literally use that to generate different math problems every single day for each kid. So I got 30 kids. I'm going to have 30 different homework sheets that are going to go out. And for my daughter, who's into like acting and stuff like that, she's going to see a whole bunch of stuff about the theater in there. She's going to hear about whatever, because like that is, as you said, Ron, meeting people where they're at. And when you do this with in something like math, it starts to click a lot quicker than if it's something you're totally not interested in. I collected baseball cards as a kid. And I learned how to do math from baseball cards because I was like, well, what is this batting average thing? And all of these different things, I would like literally just stare at that. And that's how I learned stuff. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting because I was interested in that. And for somebody who's not interested in baseball, it would have been completely useless. So, in anything you're doing, this isn't just for teachers, it's for anybody out there. Just as Ron says, you got to meet your customers. You got to meet them where they're at.
Well, I think one of the things is just like with what you're talking, like that is amazing. Like when you look at it from a teacher's perspective, and I immediately correlate that to training and employees and like everything we create so generic.
Yeah.
And like you
Yeah.
said, no one like learns the same. No
Yeah.
one understands stuff the same. No one digests his information the same. And it's as once you have that core, like we have all these core generic trainings, and it wouldn't be that hard to feed that into GPT, whatever you use, and
Yeah.
then create a questionnaire for new employees to fill out. And through those questions, it caters that directly to them. So now their information they're learning. I love the example of learning math off of baseball cards because that was what your brain understood. Like I'm a real numbers guy, so math was never the problem. But like history and English, I had no interest in that. Like it just did not interest me.
Yeah.
Like, but there was ways that it would interest me is if you weave it into the stuff that does.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. Like that to me is looking at this from a completely different perspective.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's the story. I was the same. I didn't like history when I was in school because it wasn't taught. Like, I think I was in my mid 20s before I learned that Aaron Burr killed Alexander Hamilton. Like, I just missed that entirely. And then the whole Hamilton thing eventually. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, sitting vice president just like shot one of the founding fathers and like killed him in a duel. Like, that's an insane story. That wasn't in my textbook. Or if it was just like some little thing they kind of skipped over where like, to me, that should be a whole jumping off point. And of course it did. It became a musical and all that eventually. But I like, whatever that is that resonates with you, like that's where you got to meet people. And like when you find out, like, oh my God, there's some real stories here, that gets you interested in all those other things in history or whatever it might be. Um, to use this for your team, like if you got a bunch of employees or contractors working for you to do something similar, that's pretty awesome to be able to just kind of put something together and like let them know that you care about them. And again, like people use calendars, people use reminders, all that stuff. Like, I don't know, just put it like send them a questionnaire, a Google form, ask them about their birthdays, ask them about like all this other stuff, their kids' names, all that other kind of stuff. Have that in there. And then, once a year you send out a holiday card to all of them, thanking them for all that. And like you have that in there or whatever. And like, again, you need to like I wouldn't have the AI write that stuff necessarily. I mean, you got to be personal yourself, but you could have the AI start like remind you to do that. You could have the AI gather that information for you so you can do these things more
I,
effectively.
I think one of the most powerful, a couple of years ago, I was having a conversation about AI and that's we're talking 2022 when things were no one really knew what exactly was happening, other than it's very powerful. And I think the thing that he told me then rings so true to today is AI is there to just help me be better, be more efficient. At the end of the day, I'm the expert. I'm the
Yes.
one that has to
Yes.
make the decisions, but what AI does, it allows me not to spend the hours that it takes to generate the information to be able to say, put a blog out. I still have to be the expert. I have to validate everything. I have to speak to it from my perspective. But what it does is it frees me up to only operate in that. Like now I only have to operate as the expert. And that's what you're talking about when it's like the reminders, the suggestions. Hey, this is coming up. Here's what we recommend. But it's still on you as being the business owner, as being the expert to then be able to validate and say this is what we're going to do, but it freed you up from having to think of all of this stuff,
Yeah.
put it together and remember it. And it just allows you to always function in what is your true state of mastery. Where should
Absolutely.
you be at?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, think of these AIs as $20 a month interns that can do any administrative type task that you can imagine, and that basically instantly forget everything about you every time. Also, like that's the other thing. Like you always have to remind, like, hey, this is my business. You always have to kind of remind all that because otherwise it could go in like weird, crazy directions. There's a little bit of memory in these systems, but for the most part, you always got to kind of give a constant reminder to these systems.
Well, I just sometimes it'll spit off some crazy stuff, and I'm
Yeah.
like, you need to go back and relook at some of our conversations and actually, I think you forgot what we actually do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it happens all the time. It happens with me too. And then, like, usually when that happens, what I do is I just start a fresh session or something like that, and I'm just like, okay, here's what we do. Here's my business. Here's the goal of that. And I actually have that like in a Word doc that I will just commonly like just cut and paste in there, just like as a little refresher. Even though I probably pasted it, I couldn't even tell you how many times into the AI. It's good to remind it because it does forget stuff,
Yeah,
basically.
no, it is good. And I think just a generous suggestion for everybody out there that's starting to use this is I always lead my AIs that I'm building with a saying, and that is, I hate emojis, never use them. Uh, because they way overuse emojis, and I don't like to see emoji. I didn't like them beforehand. Now I really don't, because like, to me, that's the give or tell that
Yeah,
somebody like, this is unedited chat GPT,
yeah.
because there's like 20 emojis in this post or this email, and
Yeah.
like, I take that out immediately, and I don't want to have to delete them, so I just tell it, never use emojis.
Yeah. Yeah, if you ask an AI to do a LinkedIn post for you, it will give you all of these crazy emojis in there. I'm like, no, who does this? Like, or something. So,
But then
um,
you go on LinkedIn and you're like, AI is running LinkedIn.
it
Like,
no, actually, I read something recently, Ron. I think so, because there are some decent AI detectors out there. Decent. They used to be awful, but like decent ones that could sort of see, is this written by a human or written by an AI? And someone was using that, and it was something like 50% of like the longer posts on LinkedIn are pretty much just AI generated. Like, and it's only going to go up from there.
yeah,
As part of that. But look, I think in so many ways you can, you know, the one thing, I mean, one thing I do want to say, so like to give like a specific recommendation to folks who might not be using this, like just use one of the tools. Like take $20 a month and buy ChatGPT. You use the best month. They have a $200 a month version. You don't need that one. Don't worry about that one. Spend $20 a month on this, and you will start to find that there are ways that can help you in your business, in your personal life, and so on and so forth. Like that's the one recommendation. Like one tip I will give you, especially for folks who are like in the car a lot. Like if you're in the car a lot, there is a voice assistant mode of ChatGPT that is amazing. You can talk to it in natural language. I actually started writing a book on it where I would like literally just go for walks. I would just start talking to it. It's transcribing everything as you're talking. I would occasionally ask it questions about what I'm writing about. And at the end, I would say, hey, can you kind of summarize all of this, all these thoughts for me? And it can do that. It can do that amazingly well. Like those kind, and this is all for $20 a month. So like that's at the very least where I would say for folks who maybe aren't into the AI world, maybe tried it a couple times, maybe you tried it when it came out a couple of years ago, but like, it's not that good. Make the investment, commit to use this for a month, download the app on your iOS or Android device, and just use it. And like you will find out, like I even use this with the kids in the car. Occasionally we'll just put on the thing and they're like, hey, can you ask increasingly difficult history questions to my daughter? She's learning about the Revolutionary War or something, and she's in fifth grade. And like it'll start doing that, and like she could answer them, and it'll just keep going back and forth like that. Like there's so much that like there's infinite possibilities with these tools. You just got to kind of get in there and just like get your hands dirty and play with them.
I love it, man. So for everybody listening, where's the best places to be able to follow you and get a hold of this blog? And for myself, where do I get a hold of this blog? Like,
Yeah. No, thank you, Ron. So I publish, it's totally free. I mean, I'm not making any money off of it. I'm on LinkedIn and Medium under just Tedasco, my last name. And I'm also on like Blue Sky and X under Tedasco if you want to follow me there. I usually will, sometimes occasionally post stuff that's interesting. But most active on LinkedIn if people want to follow me there. And that's definitely where I post all of the AI stuff. And if you got a question, just ask me. Like I'm more than happy to answer any questions that folks have on this. It can be intimidating at first. Um, so if there's a way I can help out, let me know.
awesome, man. Well, thank you for taking the time and being on the show today.
Ron, it was a pleasure. A lot of fun. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, construction champions, another episode in the bay. And I think it is December 16th that this is coming out. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it, that this right here is probably the most important and most practical conversation around AI in construction that has been released. And definitely going into 2025, this is the conversation that people need to be listening to understand how they can start to bring AI into their business. And I love Mike's suggestion of just go find a resource that you like and just pay this subscription. Like ChatGPT is $20 a month. I've had a ChatGPT subscription since it has come out. And I'll tell you what, when you talk about over delivering on value, like it's unbelievable what you get for $20 a month. I can't even fathom. As being somebody that owns a software company, I strive to deliver that kind of value uh, to subscribe. Like it's just insane. We all have that $20 a month sitting somewhere, and it will make you a lot more than that $20 if you let it. And you just start using it and just keep it simple to start with. There's all kinds of great resources out there. I would highly recommend following Mike. And like he said, reach out to him and ask him questions. He's a very amazing individual. Like he says, he has no monetary in any of this stuff. He's literally out here just helping educate people because he knows where the future's at. And I remember our first conversation was all around that, where he's like, I just want to help people understand AI and how to utilize it and how to get started utilizing it. And here we are. I know this right here going into 2025 is going to be one of the most important conversations around how construction businesses can start to implement AI. So, guys, make sure you go check out all of our fantastic sponsors. And until next time, be the champion you were meant to be. Hey, construction champions, it's your host, Ron Newsbaum here. And I want to talk to you about how you can automate all of your marketing. We've had so many people on here talk about getting the systems in place. Well, we have partnered with Build 12 and Construction Champions podcast. Les O'Hara, the founder, what really excites me is his 30 years in the industry. And now he's built a system to be able to nurture your leads and continue to utilize that. I personally use the system myself. Build 12 is absolutely amazing. There's a lot of value in there, and it's a way to start getting away from Angie's List and all of that kind of stuff and start actually creating your own leads every day and have a system for them. So go on our website, check out the show notes, go check out Build 12.
Introducing HomeTrack. We create digital new home profiles using homeowner specifications, pictures, and warranty policies, replacing the large paper binders normally provided by home builders to their buyers. We also digitize the final blue tape walkthrough and instantly create a punch list that both builders and homeowners can track and tell a resolution. By simplifying the handover process, we are saving home builders time and money.